The world is changing faster than ever before. In the past 10 years, there has been an exponential technological evolution, the kind of technology that has revolutionized the world of work as we know it.
The Lawyers Hub was founded on the principle that law needs to interact more with technology, and that greatly affects tech policy as well as access to justice. So the Lawyers Hub exists as a confluence between law and technology, working on tech policy, on emerging technologies, as well as increasing and upskilling the knowledge of lawyers in the area of technology. We support tech startups as well to ensure that the tech ecosystem also engages in policy, but as well understand the issues around data protection, issues that also concern their structure, as well as intellectual property.
If you look at the evolution of technology, it's been relegated as an alternative in most systems. But the realization that 21st century has brought us into is that technology has to be an integral part of our day-to-day systems. And if you look at some critical technology areas like artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology, biotechnology, then it gives us a strong indication that if we do not start having discussions on the use of these technology areas, as far as law is concerned, then we may be in some kind of trouble. So Lawyers Hub is leading the debate on the use of these technologies, especially in Africa.
Over the years, the Lawyers Hub has supported the innovation ecosystem, convened events such as the Africa Law Tech Festival and the Global Legal Hackathon. The Lawyers Hub has also supported government innovations within the justice sector, as well as trained government institutions and more than 10,000 lawyers across Africa on emerging tech policy.
Our dream at the Lawyers Hub is to have open access to law. We envision a continent where there is access to justice through leveraging technology and with a crowd of enlightened lawyers. We see a continent that also protects its own through better tech policies, that emerging technologies, through its regulation, will offer better value and consumer protection for the people within Kenya and within the African continent. We envision that we will convene policy makers, regulators, as well as lawyers who are more enlightened on emerging technologies and with better digital skills. And we invite you to be a part of this great vision for Kenya and for Africa. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us this Monday. We're grateful that you're joining us to examine Zimbabwe's national AI strategy. My name is Linda Bonyo. I am the founder of the Lawyers Hub, and I'm very happy to take you through today's session. We're excited to hear, where everybody is joining in us from. We have incredible speakers, and it's a lovely day. So we're looking forward to this conversation. I want to appreciate everyone who's in the room. We'd love to hear where you're joining in from. Feel free to tag us on our socials, Lawyers Hub, Africa. Find us on every digital platform. You'll be able to find us. I'd want to appreciate Apiwe Hotele joining us from the African Union Commission from Addis Ababa. I see Robinson Kaka Makalos requesting for the video, joining in from Kampala, Uganda. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing our content online. We really appreciate the support. I see Joy Matibira joining us from Zimbabwe, from the Zig Group. I also see Linsley Wallet joining in from South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us today. And several other people that have posted in. Make sure you post to everyone so that everybody sees your chat, unless you're speaking to the panel only. I see Masood joining in from Lawyers for Media in Addis Ababa. Thanks for joining us. Milton Kudzai from Harare. I'm also seeing Kenyatta Samson from Kenya joining us. Thanks for coming today. I see Penina Naktankunde from Katende Sempebwa Advocates in Uganda. Webster Mushefa from Harare, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone that is joining us from the continent, and Bosco Kavisu from Kenya. If I don't read your chat, just know that it's flowing too fast and it's a lot, but we really appreciate you joining us for this specific conversation. This conversation will take different angles. It's not a political conversation alone. It's an economic conversation, but also it's a conversation about identity and about the African continent. So we hope that at the end of the conversation, we come up with solutions that will help the continent. We also hope that we will empower you to see that sometimes policy and strategy is not what it looks like, but we hope that it will make you engaged in what's happening in the continent. We also hope that you'll be able to see opportunities, because strategy speaks a lot to what's coming and what's the opportunity. Our approach today will also be to look at, well, how does Zimbabwe compare to the rest of the continent, and what are we able to learn from what's happening in Zimbabwe. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'll go through a conversation through some slides to set the basis and the foundation so that we can argue from points rather than from what we feel. And then secondly, we will go to our panel who will talk about the different things that stand out for them, what they feel is a problem or an opportunity. And then I'll come to you and get your questions. So we'll upgrade you to speak, and then you can be able to ask a question or make a comment, and then we'll wrap this up. It's only 1 hour, so that means that there's no time and we have to go very quickly. So let's make it fast, furious, but then also feasible and beneficial to everyone else on the call. So thank you so much for joining us. So I'll ask the media team to share the slides. I'm seeing everyone who's joining in. I'll read in your chats later on, but thank you so much. So I would like to share a bit about what we've done before. The past 3 weeks, if you haven't watched what we've done, you'll see us discussing the Kenya AI bill, copyright bills from Kenya and Uganda, but also various other conversations that the lawyers has had. Make us famous on YouTube, watch these things, and I believe that they will be able to change how you think about different technologies. We think at this point that Zimbabwe has produced the most comprehensive AI strategy in the African continent, something that other countries are actually doing in their AI bills, and looking at their national AI policies. So it's very comprehensive in our view, but what does it mean in terms of execution? And we'll get to that with our panel. One of the what we learned from the Zimbabwe AI strategy is really its vision in terms of shared prosperity and to elevate citizen dignity. So it takes this approach of AI for development. One of the unique things about it is it's grounded on Ubuntu. I can't pronounce the word they talk about, Nika Inavakwa Nevene Navayo. My Zimbabwe friends will pronounce it very well, but it's aligned with their Vision 2030. And the fact is this, we must say that this is supported by UNESCO. This strategy, it's clear on the document that it's supported by UNESCO in terms of technical and financial support. Compared to Kenya, for example, that was supported by GIZ, the German foundation. So it's important to look at what exactly is going on. But the foundation basis of this AI strategy is from the UNESCO AI Readiness Assessment. So it's important to read what the assessment looked like and if the strategy ideally covers this. So you have 8 guiding principles on the fact that it's human-centric, it's transparent, safety, inclusivity, but also innovation. So we see all those 8 strategies on this. So on my next slide, within the strategy, there are 5 flagship initiatives that's supposed to launch within 18 months of adoption. So we realize that Zimbabwe is very specific in the timelines that it puts within its AI strategy. So one is the AI Grant Challenge, which they'll be able to do an annual competition on national priorities. So that's on year 1. They have Project Pangolin. Forgive me if I mispronounce it, but it's a secure sovereign federated data platform. So that's also they're looking at in terms of digitizing agriculture. Then they have the AI campaign, the national AI literacy through schools. So they've introduced radio and media and schools and looking at community digital ambassadors. They also have an innovation crucible, which is a regulatory sandbox for 5 to 7 startups. So they're looking at, if you've about regulatory sandboxes, is to look at ways in which you can have companies come in and be exempted from strict regulations or policy as they innovate until they're able to go out and launch. And then you also have a fund which they have set up as an AI fund, which matches private capital in these certified AI startups. That's also sort of a first in the continent. So they have a 3-phase implementation roadmap. One is the sprint. They've divided it into the first 100 days. So Zimbabwe has appointed a director. The director has to be recruited. Grand Challenge has to be launched. MOUs with 2 universities on artificial intelligence. And they introduce a diaspora. Zimbabwe acknowledges that the diaspora ideally has expertise. And so they're going to have a diaspora portal live, and then also a town hall on Come Home and Build, which is useful. On phase 2, they have the build. So they will going to have this Pangolin Data Trust gazetted. They're going to have the startups already, Innovation Crucible, and then a Harare Declaration Conference, which is useful as you see this. So in terms of AI curriculum, they want to start from 100 schools in terms of capacity building. And on the 3rd phase, which is Q1 of 2028 to 2030, they're looking at, with the Grand Challenge solution, 25% of farmers. Then they're looking at the sandbox, ideally has graduated 3+, candidates. They're looking at certification and also $100 million plus AI startup, which is called Zimbacon. Interesting. So let's look at the governance architecture and the risk framework, which is useful. I'd like to mention that they start from the strategic mind, which is like chaired by the Office of the President. So they give this strategy and policy alignment. But then they also have housed within the Ministry of ICT in terms of an institution, which if you compare to what Kenya had no institution ideally to run this. But the strategy sort of houses it within the Ministry of ICT. And then finally, they have government institution plus private sector, where it's like an advisory expert hand that comes in to help implement the strategy. So the unique features that like we see is they have come in to introduce district community AI councils. That is, like if you compare it to Kenya, it's like devolution, which Kenya's AI bill tried to implement in terms of devolving AI. Then you have a parliamentary standing committee on AI, which is unique among the African strategies. Then you have a national digital regulatory committee, and also Ubuntu ethical impact assessment. So Ubuntu is very unique to what Zimbabwe has done, and we'll go a bit more on what does Ubuntu mean in terms of for this Africa especially. So we are seeing a trend in who's coming in with the strategies. So out of Africa's AI strategy, you have the first movers who gave their first AI strategies. Then you had a second wave. And then last year, we saw the 2025 to 2026 wave with Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Namibia, Ghana. And now 2026, we have Zimbabwe. So we are seeing a difference between the very first strategies that were, hosted in, that were drafted in the continent, and now with especially what is, happening. So let's go to the next slide. The pillars, as we've seen, which one is unique, we would talk about this international collaboration and diaspora, which we'd like to highlight, and the flagship initiatives. These are things that we think are really, really crucial amongst, Zimbabwe's strategic architectures. So let's go to the next one. And we speak about how, Zimbabwe compares. For those that are in the room and from Kenya, Kenya was very ecosystem focused. Like you read Zimbabwe's strategy, Zimbabwe begins from, it just goes straight on to the point. Kenya sort of mapped out, did an ecosystem mapping, and then came up with the strategies. And you see what every country is positioning, like Rwanda is positioning its AI lab within the context. When you come into Egypt, for example, it's government and development, and Nigeria was talent and startups. And within the AU's continental framework, you see what the African Union ideally is doing in this sense. So let's go to the next slide. So what are the strengths in this strategy? So we think it's very comprehensive. How Zimbabwe is moving sort of feels like, so what's going to be left for the national policy? So what else is left to take to national policy? Two, the introduction of these district councils and to make it, ground up. And then we see a very indigenous ethics framework around artificial intelligence. Whether this works or not is left to discussion as we continue to talk about this. Does Ubuntu work as a governance mechanism? But also we're seeing in terms of hardware, in the ambition, they talk about manufacturing, especially in the context of, artificial intelligence. And they also actually talk about how does Zimbabwe take whatever it's manufactured to the West, to the world, but then also how to benchmark with the world. They've also had a very detailed M&D framework on the continent on how do you keep us accountable, that within a year, this is what we have to do. Within 18 months, this is what we have to do. So that's really a great framework. Then it's specific to its diaspora. Maybe everyone else doesn't have diaspora. Zimbabweans are out in the diaspora, but they talk about a diaspora strategy, including engaging them within an advisory framework, having a portal for the diaspora, and also how to, engage, further. They have a diaspora body that people serve every 2 years. So this is the most vivid risk framing. They talk about algorithmic apartheid and digital colonialism. Let's go to the next one. So we've compared a bit of SADC. We'll get this, comparison from the panel on what they think is the impact on SADC and how SADC is moving, but also the impact on South Africa as a neighbor. And many Zimbabweans live in South Africa. So I'll skip 2 slides and go to, the next one. If we could go to the next slide. Let's skip East Africa. On what it looks like in terms of benchmarking. So let's go to the next slide. So we did this differentiation between Kenya and Zimbabwe. And one is for startups. Kenya really tried to figure out, we can't build as fast as possible. We are going to introduce big tech companies to help us build technology, build conversations, and build capacity, But Zimbabwe says we will build from the ground up. We don't want the dependency. That is what is coming out from this strategy. But also, too, Zimbabwe comes up with the cultural impact assessment that when you deploy technology, before you deploy these particular AI technologies, what impact does it have on our culture, which is interesting. So let's go to the forward on, these 2 models. Kenya says, come build here. So they invite, all the big tech companies because they know Google has a research lab, same as Microsoft. The presence of these big tech companies in Nairobi is undeniable. We also have the KEPSA Microsoft Alliance that is building capacity in this sense. But Zimbabwe looks at the curriculum and says, we will begin from K-12 and tertiary. We will introduce the language, AI content within our schools, AI centers of excellence, but also work on our diaspora. So everything must be built sort of from the ground up. So we'll also discuss those models, whether it's true or not. So that when you go to the next slide, I'd like us to talk about the intellectual property paradox. Kenyans don't roast me, but within Kenya's AI strategy, so first I'll start from Zimbabwe. The design and layout of the strategy appreciates their graphic designer. Kenya's AI strategy, I am so sorry, I listen to my reports when I'm busy. I listen to Kenya's strategy, and the person who said it said, generated from ChatGPT. And I went back to check, and I realized that ideally most of the things that images on Kenya's AI strategy are AI generated, all the images. Including the cover page. But Zimbabwe has really talked about intellectual property within the draft, but also appreciated, including the graphic designer, which is interesting. South Africans, we have talked about the Dabas, anomaly, which we'll talk more about next week as we discuss, South Africa's AI policy. So let's go to the next slide on timelines. I talked about the timelines that were given within Zimbabwe's strategy. It defines milestones very clearly, but Kenya does not define all these things like what is a success indicator. For example, I would say Kenya, for example, said you must, they're going to make visas, very, very easy for experts to come into the country, AI experts. Zimbabwe is not looking for external experts from what they have indicated in the draft. but Zimbabwe gives a timeline on what this looks like. Kenya did not give any timeline. It's very difficult to make Kenya accountable in what it said in its framework. So let's go to the next slides on Zimbabwe and the EU AI Act, like the difference. So we see one is on community governance. Zimbabwe really shows that. EU is very individualistic on fundamental rights, and also on risk classification, which we are seeing coming up in a lot of the strategies on how do you classify risks and red lines. So Zimbabwe does not do risk classification in this sense. It mentions risk in just one term. Next slide, please. So we see with Zimbabwe, we see like there's no taxonomy, no prohibited categories outrightly, and also conformity assessments in that sense. So maybe it's proposed for, the national policy in the sense, but we realize the difference with the EU AI Act. And we may be wrong. That's why we have a panel here. So let's go to the next slide on what are the gaps that we see in terms of this. We see with other countries, implementation is still a problem. Nice national strategy, low implementation. Will Zimbabwe fall into this risk? Also, in terms of risk classification that we've talked about, Namibia is leading now with an AI bill in parliament, as well as Kenya. Are we going to get into that next level? But as we see, Kenya had a private members bill, which did not speak to the national strategy. And also we're looking at budget figures. Zimbabwe comes in with proposing a national AI fund. So who's funding artificial intelligence in the continent? Where is it coming from? Then we look at ecosystem mapping. Some strategies just do not speak to the ecosystem. But also does Zimbabwe speak to the ecosystem? Then we're looking at institutional complexity. Who implements the national strategy? Zimbabwe has gone ahead to allocate this. And then also we are looking at what's this comprehensive design and look at what Mauritius has as a precedent. This is the master comparison. We'll talk about IP coherence, we talk about timeline, sovereignty, talent model, M&D, and implementation. If you've stayed in from the beginning, I think you've understood where this conversation is going to go. Let's have our last slide and, have a conversation on what are these, opportunities that we see this within this bill, what are within this national strategy, and what do we see as, strategic recommendations? What happens next? And so we're happy to, introduce our panelists today. We're going to, make their comments on what they see as the opportunity in Zimbabwe, the challenges, and what we could be able to, to handle and make contributions to within this particular AI ecosystem. And so, with me today, I would like to introduce my very first speaker, and our speaker. First speaker is Hanani Lomani. He's a technology law strategist and a postdoctoral researcher specializing in digital governance, platform regulation, and artificial intelligence and data governance. He has worked on, many projects on information disorders in the global south, as well as the political economy of digital platforms. His research has focused on understanding how platform ownership, governance models, and an information ecosystem influence public discourse. So I'd like to invite Hanani Lomani to take a few minutes to respond to my presentation, but also to really highlight the ecosystem. We are outsiders looking in, and Zimbabwe better than we do. So we'd like to hear what you think about this strategy.
Thanks, Linda, for the quick intro. And good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully I'm audible. Somebody could just give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Linda. You did a pretty comprehensive, breakdown and rundown of the strategy. As Linda has said, my name is Hanani Lomani. I am currently based in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. So in addition to being somebody who has worked within the space of AI policy strategy, I'm also talking as a citizen of the country, and having gone through the document myself, I have a few thoughts to share. Hopefully some resonate, and if there's any disagreement or debate, hopefully we can chat about it a bit more. As far as the strategy goes, this is Zimbabwe's first national AI strategy. It's the first actual effort at any kind of, direction or regulation when it comes to AI. And I'm quite impressed by the speed at which it was drafted and then implemented, or rather adopted. And this is, of course, following UNESCO's readiness assessment, wherein, they looked at it from whether it's the legal point of view, whether it's from the operational point of view, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So being able to come up with this document in such a short period of time was quite impressive, I think, from my point of view, which really makes it a very live, policy in the sense that it responds to the findings, but also it gives evidence. It's giving an evidence base rather than being purely aspirational in the sense that it's quite comprehensive. Um, However, I also have a few things that I think were not addressed quite a lot, and this is in terms of, policy choices and trade-offs. At the moment, and as we all know, the continent is currently engaged and actively trying to pursue the African Free Continental Trade Agreement. And one of the items that is spoken about quite a lot within the strategy is that of self-determination and data sovereignty. But even though the AFCFTA, for instance, is mentioned and Zimbabwe being a regional leader within SADC, we also notice that there's not a lot of conversation or a lot of talking about how to better align our policy aspirations, our policy goals with that of our neighbors and, of course, the wider continent. Um, and, when it comes to, and as we know, AI is a data-driven technology. Its efficiency, its adoption, its use is going to be very dependent on the ability of data to move from one country to another, from one server to another, from one company, person, so on and so forth. So that aspect of data flows, I feel, was not adequately addressed. Although there is mention here and there of, enabling data flows, but positioning it within the greater aspirations of the Free Continental Trade Area, or within the trade agreements already that exist between us and the other SADC countries. Not much was given, not much attention was given to that particular aspect. So it would have been interesting to see how they envision, I mean, they spoke about data infrastructure, right? Building more data capacity, data centers, and so on and so forth. But we also have this real problem in Zimbabwe at the moment where a lot of our data is still analog. It has not yet been digitized, So for the purposes of AI training, for instance, it would have been nice to also see some sort of initiative that sees the digitization of a lot of our data, which currently exists in analog format. And also and this can be done at university level. It doesn't really require a lot of expertise. It's just a matter of data capture, right? Take billions and billions of papers, turn them into digital format. So in that sense, it would have been nice to at least see some effort being put in that aspect to say, we need to be creating the data. They spoke about grounding it in Ubuntu, which is an African maxim, and it's an African aspiration. Basically, Linda's quote, which is Nika Inovaka Nevenevayo, which is basically, the country is built by its own people. It translates also to the data that goes into training the AI, right? We need to be using our own data. And to do that, we need to actually have the data. So, data creation, data storage, and data interoperability mechanisms weren't mentioned quite enough. I think it would have been interesting to see those a bit more. But also talking on AI infrastructure, currently we have 3 data centers as when I last checked, of which the biggest one falls into private hands, it's privately owned, and the 2 are operated by state bodies. But in the sense that when we're talking about AI infrastructure development, I think we need a lot more data centers that are not only capable of storing and routing data, but also capable of operating at an efficient rate. As we know, I think it's an African problem at this point. We have problems with energy, electricity supply, water supply in terms of cooling. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. So when we're talking about AI, it would have also been nice or interesting to see them acknowledge the fact that AI infrastructure, capacity building, and so on and so forth is not just an AI issue. It's also a broader governance issue that relates to electricity supply, water supply, and so on and so forth. So those partnerships that they mentioned, it would have also been a bit nicer to see them explicitly mention what kind of partnerships they want to pursue, and do so in that manner. But also, just the last point, Linda.
Okay.
The real issue that we currently have in Zimbabwe is the unaffordability of data. So when they talk about rolling out data literacy programs to the rural areas, for instance, when they talk about rolling out literacy, getting more people in schools and so on and so forth engaged within AI education and use, the real problem is the affordability. So it would have been interesting to see whether they could offer some sort of, whether it's a tax rebate or whatever the case may be, to bring down those costs so that more people actually use the internet. I mean, the usage gap in Zimbabwe at the moment is sitting at about 80 to 85%. And what I mean by usage gap is that people who have access to the internet but do not actively use it. And this is largely because of it's a largely cost issue, right?
Yeah.
In a country where the average person earns $200, $300 a month, uncapped broadband is going to run you at least 120, which is almost half your salary. So, some of those conversations have to be had. And yeah, it will be interesting to hear what the other panelists have to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hanani. I like that you highlight the cost of data. Like somebody said, Africa needs to go back to basics. As we talk about AI, what's the basic? Do people actually have access? What does it cost? As you introduce all this curriculum, how much can people really access the internet, or is for a privileged few? I also like that you introduced, in terms of data centers. Zimbabwe is the first African country to talk about green AI within its national AI strategy. It has the EU written all over it, but we know the importance also of preserving and having an environmentally conscious artificial intelligence strategy within a country. So I appreciate you for highlighting those. So let's go to our next panelist. We'll get back to you, Hanani. And today I want to, pronounce the most difficult name I have ever pronounced in my life until I got used to it. Hanani Lengiwe is joining us. She's a senior digital policy expert. She's worked at Media Monitoring Project Zimbabwe before, where she began her career. And also she has had a 7-year tenure with the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria as a project manager of Expression, Information and Digital Rights Unit. Her recent work includes authoring this report on surveillance in the digital age, South Africa, for ICNL. And she holds a master's in human rights and completing her doctoral research on state surveillance. So I want to introduce Lengiwe and ask Lengiwe what resonates, what's the opportunity, what's the problem, and how do you see it? Welcome, Lengiwe.
Thank you so much, Linda. My connection is not very good for me to put on a video, but I'll just proceed without it. Apologies for that. So thank you so
No,
much for making an attempt to pronounce my name. It always gets interesting. I have a list of different ways in which people pronounce it. It's quite fascinating. So thank you so much, Lawyers Hub, led by Linda, for these initiatives, and where you are always trying to keep us in the loop as far as what is happening on the continent in this digital policy space. So allow me just to, I see we are not, the time is not on our side, so I'll just pick a few issues. I also just want to highlight that, this strategy came at that time when, there's all this happening on the continent around AI governance. There seems to be this pressure, sort of, if I may use that term, to come up with some kind of a governing framework on AI, and Zimbabwe has responded and come up with that strategy, and it's quite detailed, and when you read it, the text is quite an ambitious document indeed. And with the 6 pillars that you were referencing, and the flagship initiatives, governance structure, and also interestingly in
Lingiwe, can you hear us?
very nice. It's laced with this nice language that we see. So, but I thought maybe we can go beyond, the strategy for its very nice poetry, and try and look at the teeth in the strategy. So when I read it, I was asking my questions around issues around redress, issues around surveillance enforcement, questions around who bears the cost of AI harm. For instance, is the strategy loud or silent when it comes to those issues? So I'll just do like a presentation of stress tests, looking at just selected issues, redress and accountability. And the strategy does really rightly talk about the right to protection from AI-related harms and control over, personal data. And there is also mention of an establishment of an AI ombudsman, which is mentioned in the strategy, with a KPI for complaints being filed before this body, and the average time for resolution. And there's also a promise of citizen satisfaction index, something like that for public services. And when I was looking at just these few things, I was asking myself whether, what then does the strategy say about human override authority, which I believe is something that is very critical, having such an initiative firmly or explicitly mentioned in the strategy, and I found that to be missing. So the question then I was asking was whether, now, when you're looking at a situation where the algorithm, for instance, denies you a loan or rejects you an application, or it cuts, your welfare benefits, something like that, and you complain to the ombudsman, can the ombudsman then reverse, that the algorithm decision? Does it have the power, or it can only goes as far as the receiving the complaints and all that? So how far does it go when it comes to overriding the decisions of the algorithm? And so the other issue that I looked at, as far as the liability issue is concerned, it's around, I didn't see in the strategy where, there's mentioned around responsibility where there's harm. The developer, the deployer, the user. I know there's mention of a clear liability framework in the strategy as something that will be established, but it does not exist yet. So then you ask yourself, this liability framework, when is it then going to be established? By whom is it going to be established? And then whilst we are waiting, I was thinking of, for instance, a woman who has had a deepfake image created, in which, a deepfake image, when it's created about you, it destroys your reputation instantly. And whilst we wait for that, what then happens? What is the mechanism, or what is this liability? What will it look like, and when are we going to have it? Moving on very quickly, I also looked briefly at issues related to issues of surveillance, defense, national security related issues. And there's explicit mention in the strategy of issues related to defense and security as a priority sector for AI transformation. And, there are several applications that are listed: cybersecurity, logistics, border management, forensic investigation, and many others. And now you then ask yourself questions that are what I was looking at within this broad context was whether the strategy is mentioning issues are related to warrant requirement. We know that if you are dealing with issues or matters related to surveillance, at least that should feature warrant requirement, judicial oversight of police and intelligence use of AI. I was also looking at issues related to restrictions when it comes to facial recognition and biometric surveillance, and also issues related to exemptions. Excuse me. So very quickly, the other issue that I also
You have a
looked
minute,
at was,
Lengiwe now. You have a
let me
minute.
just wrap up on the third part that I looked at, data governance, where the strategy is making a commitment to data sovereignty and mentions privacy, preserving access to data, and warns against data digital colonialism. And what I felt like the strategy does not really specify issues around consent requirements and penalties, for instance, for violating data sovereignty rules and all that. So I felt that there are certain gaps. I'm now leaving out some of the issues. There are certain gaps that, whilst the strategy is a good pronouncement, is a good one, it is a lot of words, but my question was whether it has teeth. And looking at some of the issues, especially when you are looking at it from a human rights-based perspective, issues such as redress, issues such as, I think it's very important to look at the eyes on national security, defense, and surveillance, and many others. And without enforcement, we are more performative than something that is going to be more useful.
Thank you. Thank you, Lengiwe. We really appreciate your comments. And thanks for highlighting the ombudsman. That's very useful. I also want to mention that Zimbabwe is the first country to talk about the Attorney General and their role in the AI strategy, which is no African government has done that in their AI strategies. So thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciate your point of view in terms of redress and surveillance, which is useful for us to know. And also, what do we do with digital lending and credit scoring that's really rampant across the African continent. Finally, I would like to invite our third speaker before we go to the Q&A. And our third speaker who is joining us today, I have so many tabs open, but we have Adio-Adet Dinika. I hope I pronounced his name right. He is an AI researcher at the Distributed AI Research Institute, DAIR. He's working on AI governance, digital labor, and decolonial approaches to technology. He's also a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bremen and works on the project on AI Pan-Africanism. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Bremen and Constructor University in Germany. So his work focuses on data workers in Africa, digital sovereignty, and worker-centered frameworks for AI accountability. I think that's really important. And so Adio, I don't know if I pronounce your name well, but the floor is yours. And you have the misfortune of being the last one with very little time. But make it succinct and precise.
Okay, can you hear me well? All right, thank you very much, Linda, for the introduction. And yeah, it's both a good thing and a bad thing to speak last, because it means you have heard everyone else cover the points you had, so now you have to rearrange your presentation, which also is good because it means it leaves me to then focus really on what I really want to say. And so what I would say is I absolutely love, and also like you guys have covered already most of the important points. And what I will go to now is what I call the soul of the question, where I ask the question, what kind of intelligence are we trying to build when we speak of AI in Zimbabwe with this strategy? And on whose backs is this AI that we want to build going to stand on? And in whose image is it going to think? And I'll explain why I think these are important questions. So yes, the Zimbabwe AI strategy deserves all the credit that it has been showered on, because I think it really is a very ambitious document, and I want to belabor that point. I think it does mention Ubuntu, which is very important to my work, and I remember having a conversation with a friend saying, oh, it seems someone is reading my work. when I read the AI strategy, I was like, oh, okay. Because I've been making a lot of noise about this, or Ubuntu, going back to the whole concept of umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. I am because you are, and not just this system where we, because my problem with AI broadly construed is that it's a system built on the destruction of other peoples, of other civilizations, of other people's consciousness and conscience to build this system. So therefore, Ubuntu is necessary there, because in our African traditions, I don't exist by myself or for myself, but I exist for other people, which is very important. But what I want to be clear on is that mentioning Ubuntu is not the same as governing through Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not a slogan. It is not a brand exercise. It's not just there to give like some sort of moral perfume to a technical agenda. And this is where I think we really need to be clear. It is a demand, because Ubuntu asks us whether intelligence can still be called intelligence if it's built through broken relations, hidden suffering, and communities being treated as raw materials. I've done most of my work around AI development in Kenya, actually. And what I've seen there is people whose minds have been frayed, severe PTSD, whose data has been stolen. And we know what's happening in the Congo, where the minerals there are being looted to sustain this bigger AI system. So when Zimbabwe is talking about an AI system that is already Ubuntu, are we talking about the workers in Kenya? Because because often when we talk about AI, we talk a lot about compute, about data, about models, but we forget to talk about the people. Because what I often say is that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent, but it is really a pyramid scheme of resources and exploited individuals and exploited people. So I say our because I'm Zimbabwean, even though I'm based in Germany, though today I'm speaking from Harare. Our AI strategy says the right things, tries to push back against this exploitative narrative. But the questions that keep coming back to me is it doing enough? Is it saying enough? Because what I mean by is it doing enough, is it saying enough, is, for example, Zimbabwe is a country of 16 million people, which is a very small market, if we are to be realistic. And for anyone in the know, compute which is used to create whatever AI model you want to make is very expensive. So 16 million people. And I like what Hanani said about, so I think Hanani said something very important about the silence around our neighbors, for instance, and the AFCT and everything else. And that is where really for me, I say, okay, so we want to make our own AI, whatever that means, because often what AI means for many people is often ChatGPT, because that is the interaction that we have. So what does it mean? So if we are 16 million people, do we have enough resources to build a system and sustain a system, or we need cooperation with our neighbors and with other partners? So we know already from research, from history, that Zimbabwe is partnered mainly with China and with Israel in terms of whatever digital products that we have seen. And we have seen serious surveillance systems being built, not just in Zimbabwe, but in many countries in Africa, where we actually import surveillance and actually curtailing of those freedoms. So we need now to think to say, does Zimbabwe's AI strategy think about which partners are we going to have? Because we will need partners. We cannot do this alone. So who are those partners and under what terms? And which I harken back to what Kwame Nkrumah said, that we are not saying that, that Africa must be united, and we can only proceed if we move together as one. So imagine if Africa, yes, many times I often say this pushback against our colleagues who say Africa is a country, but sometimes I say, well, actually, why don't we embrace that statement and say, yes, we are a country, and therefore, as a country of 1.5 billion people, these are our demands. And that time we can be taken seriously, rather than Zimbabwe 16 million trying to fight with Microsoft, trying to fight with OpenAI, where the company's just marketing budget dwarfs this country's entire budget. Can we argue on that basis? So that is something that I think is really missing from this AI strategy. And also there's another issue where, for example, they already mentioned something about involvement of rural communities. But my question is, involvement as what? As who? Like, are we involving them as raw data to be extracted, as users? Or are we going deeper to say, if we're talking about Ubuntu, we go and dig deeper into the indigenous knowledge systems, the traditional ways of living, the traditional medicines that our people have used for generations? Or are we simply saying it's yeah, we are being sovereign, but as a sovereign nation, where are we defining where our sovereignty ends and begins? Also, who's determining this agenda? We speak of consultation, but oftentimes we see what we mean by consultation is there will be a meeting, we'll give you a mic for 3 minutes, and then I set the agenda, and then at the end of the day, we throw away everything you have said.
That's
So
true.
I think these are some of the things that, yeah. So as I conclude, these are some of the things that I think we need to think about, and where I think Zimbabwe really has, in as much as the document is very ambitious, there are certain things that we need to think deeper, not just for Zimbabwe, for the greater continent, to say, how can we deepen these things? Because as we have it now, what we call localization of these systems is simply to borrow a system built elsewhere and then throw it into our country, give it a new coat of paint, it plaster our logo and say, see, our indigenous AI system.
That's
But does it speak our language? I saw something, and I think both Hanani and Hlengi were speaking earlier. I saw Side Zimbabwe get an AI news reader, and I was very critical of them because it cannot pronounce Ndebele words. And there it is. We are saying, yeah, we adopted AI, but is that AI fit for purpose when it can't pronounce basic Ndebele words? So why do we have it? How indigenous is it? How sovereign is it? With that, dear colleagues, I will shut up.
Please pronounce your name for us. Can you hear
My
me?
name is Adio, and
Oh,
I
so
don't worry. I don't care about how you pronounce it. As long as yes, I can hear you very well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adio.
Don't worry, Adio is fine. I'm not worried about how you pronounce it.
Thank you. I'll just say PhD because your t-shirt makes everybody else want to just have a PhD and wear that t-shirt. So thank you. Thank you so much for your comments.
Yes, my wife thought it would be cool if I have a t-shirt which moves around claiming I have a PhD.
That's really cool. Thank you so much, Adio. So I'd like to bring this to the floor. There's a lot happening on the chat, but I would want to, appreciate Kudzai Mubaiwa, who has linked us up with amazing people in Zimbabwe. I don't know what she thinks about startups. What does this mean for you? The conversation has been, what do you do with Microsoft and Google and OpenAI? On this other side, what do you do with your startups and the National Association of Startups? Does this really speak to them? If you have a question or a comment, feel free to lift up your hand and we'll give you the floor. You'll excuse us if we go a bit over time by maybe 7 minutes or 10 minutes max. But we'd like to hear from you and what you think. A lot of you have posted on the chat. We can't read the chats. Somebody who's watching this recording will not see the chats. So we'd like to have you just speak and let us know what's happening. So let's go to our first speaker. I will pick Danai Kudia. Danai.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the presenters. I had the privilege of being at the launch, and I would like to offer a governance practitioner's perspective rather than a policy one, and also a more much of those technical AI engineers, but more from a governance perspective.
Yes, Danai. You have a minute, though. Sorry.
Yes, I agree with you very much. The strategy is well designed at the level of architecture, which I agree. But the real question for me is the institutional absorption, whether the ministries and agencies designated as implementation sites actually have the legal, the administrative, and the human capital infrastructure to hold these systems without losing accountability, which, of course, I understand there's been a readiness assessment done, but there is more to that, more of the governance architecture. And also the digital regulatory committee is meant to include legal experts, the ethical people, and governance specialists, not just tech sector voices. Who then fills those seats will determine whether this strategy actually produces accountable AI or just fast AI. This is the point I just want to try to, more on the governance side of things, of the AI strategy rather than other semantics involved. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we must look beyond the semantics. Thank you, Danai. Let's go to Marlon Ralph. Marlon?
Thank you very much, Linda. So I'm going to be speaking from a public policy point of view. There are two risks that this strategy presents that I think is important for every other country to also look at. The first one is technological solutionism, where people then think AI is going to be a magic bullet that's going to fix a lot of problems. And the unfortunate thing about that is it leads to a diversion of attention and diversion of funds from going to places that are where it's really necessary to then go to some things that are really not really needed. Particularly if we look at the governance structure of this AI, when you now want to have national AI council and then district AI council and community AI councils, what is this money going towards? When we're then going to say we're going to train master AI teachers and a curriculum, there's potential of a waste of funds, particularly when whose funding is quite strained because of geopolitical tensions. It's very important that we are critical of where we allocate our money. Then the second thing is how people are approaching the risks of AI. So in the document, there's acknowledgement, like many other African digital transformation or AI policies from other countries, they do acknowledge that there are side effects, there are harms of introducing technology, but very little intentionality in terms of how they are going to anticipate them and measure them and mitigate against them. So there's no mention of AI-related job losses. There's no mention of how they're going to mitigate against mental health associated effects, or even their proposed solution to challenging misinformation via AI, that they'll then do radio campaigns to challenge misinformation. You can't kind of approach it that way. So that is quite a risk. And the last comment is
I have to mute you. I'm so sorry, Marlon. Thank you for your comments. I'm so sorry, but we have to go to the next person, which is George Luanda. Thanks for highlighting mental health and also the budgetary constraints. Thank you so much. George, and then we go to TT. George?
Yes, thank you. My issue is, it's not a Zimbabwean issue, it's most or AI strategies. They are not working in tandem with where AI is. So we're playing catch up and we're saying we're going to establish all these institutions. By the time you establish these institutions, AI will be a totally different character. And so as Africa, we stand to lose. We have not learned from the EU, where it took 7 years. By the time they're implementing, if you look at the EU, they've now suspended implementing quite a number of things in their strategies because AI has changed. And so that foresight analysis needs to be built in for reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. I appreciate you. Titi Akinsami, sorry, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your second name. The floor is yours. 30 seconds to go.
Name is Titi Akinsami. I'm a tech policy wonk, been doing this for 26 years. A few things. One, we should not be establishing new institutions, and I've worked across the continent. So I speak not just to the Zimbabwean AI strategy, but to how we actually connect the dots across the continent. We do not need new institutions. What we need is an upskilling both of the institutional practitioners and the regulations that guide it. It is critical, yes, to have a strategy in place, but that should be folded within existing technology strategies, so we're not building from scratch. Two, we should not, and I always, when I teach about this, I say you should not be building regulations specific to a technology, but rather to the potential enablement that it presents. Why? Because just like the last speaker said, the technology changes so rapidly that if you're building specific to this kind of AI, etc., we will miss it. Excellent. And then third is our ability to be able to build the right digital sovereignty structures in place, whether they are digital embassies or otherwise, that ensures that each nation's strategy around AI becomes attractive, because again, it's the economics of it that actually determines where investment goes. And I'm speaking on my own behalf, no attribution to anybody else. Thank you so much for putting this together, Linda.
Thank you so much, Titi. I appreciate you. All right. All right. Thank you. So we go to Nicoline Kusen, and then we'll have a closing from Kudzai. So Nicoline?
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kusen Nicoline from Cameroon. I'm a lawyer from Cameroon. My question is, yes, AI is it's very important because we can't deal without AI. My question now is about the data storage. what measure has been put in place by Africans, new technology tycoons to support the database? Because every AI has a database. Is Africa, are we having any database set in Africa to store every information? Because what's going on is if we watch the news, we realize that new technology is the current competition all over the world. China is protecting its database. America is protecting, just to name those two. So what is Africa? We are talking AI. Where is the database going? I heard one of the
Nicolene,
presenters.
I have to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us from Cameroon. We really appreciate you. And you raise a pertinent question on data centers, where the data is, and Zimbabwe takes the data localization approach. Which is it viable to do it? Kudzai.
Thank you very much, Linda. I want to just quickly highlight that you see that a lot of Zimbabwean names already have AI embedded, the Kudzais, the Danais, the Tendais, etc. I don't know what happened to Dr. Adio, but mine is more of a very quick comment, and just talking as one who actively works within the startup and SME innovation ecosystem locally. The strategy looks promising, but Zimbabweans are excellent at writing papers, not so much at bringing them to life. So my comment is very simple. We will have to go back to the basics in order to get the impact that we are seeking. And this is basically going back to making sure that people, that there's infrastructure, there's funding, and that there are digital skills. I also actively work in the Internet Society, the local chapter, the Zimbabwean chapter, and our pure offline is connecting the unconnected. We still have a lot of base work to do before we do the fancy and sexy things that AI would demand. So the key in conclusion is execution. Let us invest in local talent. Let us have practical support mechanisms. That way our SMEs don't just actively consume AI, but they can also begin to build on it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kudzai. I see you have the AI already. My daughter is called Tinashe. So I'm going to add an A there so that she already has AI from birth. So I want to come back to my panelist. I'm giving you exactly 30 seconds on your parting shot. But meanwhile, let's go on the chat. I'm unable to read all the messages. There's so many, I'm going to go through them. But I'd ask you to connect with those that have posted in their LinkedIn links there. Please connect with people. Let's be Pan-African in every way. Let's get to know Nicolene from Cameroon, everyone else who's joined us. Just post a link there on how people can find you, so we find each other and work together. And as we proceed to maybe the national policy framework, let's be part of these conversations. Next Monday, we will be here talking about a different topic, most probably the South African national policy. So please share whatever you see we post on LinkedIn, on every other platform. Please just reshare, give it to your friends, send them the link, follow us on WhatsApp. And we want to just put our WhatsApp number so you can see our status and share it with your friends. Don't be jealous. We can all build the African continent if we do, just a little bit of our part, and we change the continent. We can also, those are in the room and are thinking of data centers. I want to encourage you that form a new entity, do it together. Let's build our own data centers, so we are not renting intelligence, we are not renting these spaces, but we actually own them. So to my panelists, I will start from Hanani. What's your parting shot?
I think the last parting shot that I have basically from what I've heard is that we need to take anticipatory governance a lot more seriously. AI is developing at a very, very, very fast rate, and it's quite impossible to stay up to date, especially because a lot of legal processes, unfold very slowly, and it's a game of supersonic jet versus a snail. So we need to make use of more anticipatory methods and models, strategic foresight, futures thinking. Sandboxing is very important as well. And I know you guys at Lawyers Hub do a lot of hackathons as well. So those will be very important going forward. And hopefully the Ministry of ICT down in Zimbabwe also takes that into consideration and takes it seriously. Because, we can't be playing catch up all the time. We need to be playing a more active role. And so, That's just what I have to say at the moment. Yeah, but thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Hanani, for your expertise and your thoughts. We really appreciate you. Let's go to Lengiwe. Are you there?
Thank you so much for all the contributions, very important comments. I just want to wrap up by, agreeing with Titi on the point about the institutional proliferation that we see, where there's this new policy and it comes up with a new institutional arrangement. And I do agree with her that we need an enhancement rather of what is already existing, because we have a lot of institutions around which are not well capacitated, whether it's in terms of resources or it's in terms of expertise. And in this case, we already see in this strategy that new institutions or a new institution is going to be established in terms of these. But look at the Data Protection Authority, for instance. Has it been capacitated well enough just to perform its data protection mandate? The way it looks like right now, you will agree with me from what we have seen, that it still needs a lot of capacity, a lot of enhancements. So if we bring in new institutions, are we doing any good? I think we need to enhance what is already existing, but also looking at AI being a very cross-cutting issue. You can look at this strategy and analyze it from a children's rights perspective. We can look at this strategy and you look at from a gender lens, from an economic perspective, or from a startup perspective, and all that. So I think there has to be a spreading of the capacity in terms of the issues related to AI across institutions, across different government entities, different government departments. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lengiwe. I appreciate you for all the support that you give Lawyers Hub. We really appreciate you. Now let's go to Adio, PhD.
Thank you very much, Linda, and everyone for listening. I think what I want to say in parting is that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. It's literally the automation of our collective intelligence. And if we are to get serious with actual Ubuntu-based intelligence systems within our countries, we need to go back to that very fact that the intelligence comes from us. These are machines simply imitating what we are doing, and therefore we cannot continue building systems that are built on the back of exploitation of our people, our land, because most of the AI systems currently in existence were built by our people, their labor, and also who gets to determine what counts as knowledge. Right. So we need to strongly think about what Ubuntu means. I am because you are, and therefore, by the same token, we cannot prioritize artificial systems which don't have that basic understanding of what humanity means. If we go there, I can assure you we can build a truly indigenous and sovereign African AI system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adio. We really appreciate you. I want to appreciate everyone who's made this possible, the Lawyers Hub team. I want to thank you especially to Louisa Odingo and to Kenneth Agengo. Thank you so much for the support that you lent to this particular episode. We really appreciate you. I'd also want to say this. You need to join us in Nairobi on 9th and 10th of August. 9th and 10th of August, the Africa Law and Tech Festival is happening again for the 7th time. We invite you to join us in Nairobi. Check out our website, lawyershub.org. You'll see a lot of the work that we're doing. We also keep track of AI policy news across the African continent. So go to aipolicy.africa. You'll see a lot of the work that we've been doing on AI summer schools that you could join in to build your capacity. Get in touch with us. Let's be friends. Let's work together, and let's see what we could do for the African continent. I believe the most important, phrase have come through, across in Zimbabwe's AI national strategy is this: a nation is built by its citizens. I think that quote is so powerful. I'm going to learn it to speak it in the national language of Zimbabwe. But I would want to say that we build Africa. It is us, whether we're in the diaspora, which Zimbabwe tries to tap into its diaspora people to come and build the AI framework, or whether we live in Africa. I believe that we can build Africa. We can own those data centers. We can be the big tech companies that we're talking about. We can empower our startups. And so as we go out, we hope that this week you're going to write an article in the papers because you understand this better. Let your opinion be known in your local dailies in Harare. Let your opinions be known on social media on what you think about this. Engage with the government and share information that you have around policy making around your own digital policy. We'd like to be your partners, and we'd like to make a coherent, conversation across the African continent. Join us next Monday, same time. We'll be talking about something different. Just check it on our platforms. Please join us when you can. We promise you that we will build your capacity. You don't have to read the National Gazette. Just join us on Mondays and you'll know what's happening across the African continent on digital policy. But don't just watch, engage, write, critique, add to it the conversation. Write to your members of parliament. Let them know what you think about these things, because you now know better and you will do better. So from the Lawyers Hub, we love you all. Thank you, and check out this episode on YouTube especially. Thank you so much and have a good one. We'll not cut the session short. Sorry. Go on the chat. Make sure you connect with everyone. I will do the same and read the chat so that we come out of this with a nice connection. We love you all. Bye, everyone.